My name is Jill. We are here on Survival Road, and today we're talking about the idea of intermittent fasting as it relates to a long-term food strategy. For survival, what does that mean? Deep breath, and we'll see you on the other side. So what do I mean by intermittent fasting? Well, the reason I'm bringing that up, there's basically three components to that. If you've done any research, and you might have heard these trigger words, is there's fat adaptation, which means your body burns fuel for fat. There's intermittent fasting, which can or cannot put your body into a fat adaptive state. And then there's ketosis, in which you're putting yourself in a fat burning state, but you may not be intermittent fasting. So there's different versions of this, there's different opinions about all this, but the reason I'm bringing it up is on our my quest to feel and understand more wild. The little light bulb went off when I was reading Natural Born Heroes, and he was talking about how the Greeks and the British were running up and down these mountains 50 miles at a night, up and down, on like no food. I'm like, how are they doing that? And then, you know, the little wheels are turning, thinking, that is a really good survival strategy, because the real life answer is if things are funky, then we're probably going to be extremely physically active. Just try chopping wood and having to heat your water up every day is exhausting. So most of us aren't that mobile, or that we don't move that much, but if the electricity goes out, there's definitely going to be more mobility. Or we do have to walk away. There's going to be a higher physical demand that most of us aren't prepared to deal with in a hungry state of mind. And what happens when you turn your body into a more fat adaptive, which means you're burning fuel instead of sugar for your primary energy source, is that over time you don't have hunger, you have stamina, you have increased cognitive, you can better handle stress, and a whole myriad of other health and cognitive benefits that don't have anything to do with survival, but just are big fat bonuses. So I got really interested in that and have decided to explore it personally, so I'm starting to do that switch myself. But the big question I had was, how long would it take? And so I linked a guy below named Edward, I think he's out of Miami, personal trainer, who I thought did the best job of breaking down what's happening in the process of length of time. If you're not familiar with these three terms and you want to learn more, I've got links below that. But this isn't an educational video on these three things. This is if you want to try it, start thinking about it. There's some time involved, and that's why I wanted to throw this out there, because I think it's a really interesting idea, thinking about the walking away and any kind of long-term survival scenario. So the short version is that it takes 2 to 3 weeks to get through that withdrawal of the carbohydrate state and to really get your body accustomed to letting go of sugar as your primary fuel source. So you can expect things for the 2 to 3 weeks like headaches, fatigue, muscle burning, moodiness, low energy, all kinds of fabulous things, because you're basically in a withdrawal state. You're turning off your body's addiction or dependence or comfort with burning sugar for fuel. The next 2 to 3 months is when your body is learning how to burn fuel, fat for fuel. So that's when the enzymes start getting produced. You're starting to make these shifts. There's some other things that are involved if you're going to be doing sports or physically demanded things, but we're not talking about that today. But it takes 2 to 3 years to get into the state that I am most interested in, and that is a flexible state in which your body can easily move back and forth between fat or sugar as a fuel burning source. And the reason why I feel like that's so important is that when you look at our ancient ancestors or indigenous people, they don't have a grocery store. They have seasons, and not every season is the same. So the body, it just makes so much sense to me. It has to be adaptive. And if we move into a situation that requires us to be more flexible and adaptive, it makes complete sense to me that we want to have a body that can use either fuel source efficiently, but primarily when you depend on fat as fuel, you don't have all those problems that we get when we get hungry every few hours, all day, every day. If you could remove that, if you could remove hunger and you could remove the limitations between physical activity and endurance based on food intake, those things would be huge. So that's really what lit me up. So at a practical level, it's just really simply about focusing on proteins, fats, and I'm trying to make it super simple, so I'm focusing on greens. Right now, I think, I'm trying to figure out how to sprout those. I put them in the little containers because now I'm trying to see how I can do 1 serving of sprout, maybe do 30 of those. And then the other big one is I found these cool little, it's a coconut fiber, microgreens. So the difference between sprouts and microgreens are in dirt, sprouts are just with water, and they are super nutrient dense. They take up a small amount of space, because the other thing I'm thinking about is if you are in a walkaway strategy, you can't plant a garden. You have to be able to take things with you. And so while heavy, obviously not in a glass jar, it would be smarter. There's a ton of nutrition in this amount of seeds, as opposed to even if this thing was filled with peanut butter or pemmican or some other kind of high density food, that this would be an extremely dense amount of food in a small space. So I really like the idea of, if I'm going to walk away and haul some kind of food, I want to bring a seed that I can sprout or plant and grow in a quick situation. That just makes more sense to me. So that's just a quick introduction to this idea of what I think might be a really good strategy for health. It's a good strategy for weight loss if you need to do that. It's a good strategy for cognitive improvement. And it's a really good strategy, I think, for survival. Sorry if this is windy, but of course the minute I decide to come out and do this, whoosh, as usual. So I'm going to be talking about this some more. I don't like to get into a lot of nutrition discussions with people because they get emotional about it. I've been studying nutrition for 40 years. I've been aware of this idea for a long time, but there's so much more information available. And I think the important piece that was missing with like the Atkins and those high protein diets is the importance of the vegetables, the potassium, the salt, the leafy greens, the cruciferous, things like that, that they never really promoted in the previous incarnations. And then more research into how indigenous people actually lived. I'll be sharing some of that later. But this is just a seed planting video, no pun intended, to really maybe start thinking about what would your food strategy be. I know I made a food storage strategy, but this one is a walk-away strategy, meaning you can only take what you can carry. I'm going to be carrying seeds and a fat source as the two primary things I think that I would walk away with. What you choose to carry would be up to you, but we're just checking in today on our survival road adventure. So before we go, we're going to take one more deep breath for the road, as I hope you will rise with the sun in your eyes, love in your heart, feet firmly on the ground as we walk together one step at a time. So we're going to say it one more time. If I didn't say it at the beginning, I've done a couple takes, so I'm not sure which version this is. But stay human, live free, and die wild. And with that, we'll see you next time.